Tell me if this at all sounds familiar. You left a 40-hour-a-week job and you end up working 60 plus hours a week for yourself, which it's ironic because most of the time when founders leave to start their own company, one of the primary reasons they do it is for the time freedom that they see as something that founders eventually get. But the irony of all of this is that it's really not the standard to be able to work way less hours than you were when you were working for somebody else. There was a report from Harvard Business Review a couple of years ago that showed 58% of founders that are in the stage from like 1.5 million to 5 million a year in revenue with about 15% EBITDA is what the report had. Those people work more than 50 hours a week, 58% of those people. So it's not abnormal to be working so much. And when you ask most of these people what's going to happen, and this may be something that you say yourself too, probably look at that as maybe a time management problem, when in reality, it's more of a time leverage problem. You still have the same amount of hours that everybody else has in every single day, but you probably see some people that work a lot less and you wonder how they did it. You might be looking at that going like, I got to manage my time a little bit better. You actually need to consider leveraging your time a little bit better, because that is ultimately what is going to cut down your hours, which is what we're talking about in this video here. I'm going to give you 3 metrics that most founders don't know about or look at, and even fewer know how to do anything with once they know the numbers, that is going to help give you more time freedom. And we're talking probably 10 to 20 hours a week, cutting that over the course of time. By the way, my name is Brent, and I run a commercial real estate services company that does just under $2 million a year with 34% EBITDA, and the whole thing takes me about 90 minutes a week. I've owned the company for more than 2 decades, and when I gave up control, you would think that I gave up profit and control of what was going on. But I ironically got more profit and I got a tighter set of control on the things that really mattered when I did it. Now, I spend time making videos like this and helping founders in the sweet spot remove 10 to 15 hours a week within 24 weeks, just by running a few simple tools that I put together. They're all plug and play. Before I get into the 3 metrics here, I want to talk about a point that's going to illustrate this. Let's say that I have got 2 separate founders, and we've got business A and business B. Founder A owns founder A, business B, founder B owns that. Both of these do $2 million a year. Both of these have 15% EBITDA. Founder 1 in company A, he works 60 hours a week and he's responsible for things like sales and probably some fulfillment. Maybe there's like the big client, like the whale, that he's still responsible for handling in the customer service realm. Business B, the founder is only responsible for strategy. Which one of those 2 is worth more? Well, you know which one is worth more. It's the one where the guy does the strategy, but you may not know why. When private equity firms look at buying companies, they will look at something called key man risk. And that is where how much is one key person, particularly the founder who they're buying out, how important is that person to the business? And when I first learned about this, it was like this massive eye-opening moment, because they detract 3 times of your multiple of your EBITDA when you've got key man risk. So it's a really important thing to look at if their plan is to eventually go sell your company. I think a lot of people talk to you about scaling to 8 figures and beyond so you can eventually sell it. I like to look at it more like companies usually aren't worth nearly what the founder thinks they're worth. And so they're better off just living an amazing lifestyle and working a lot less. And that's why I make the videos I do and talk about what I do, because you can enjoy that stuff right now, not 5 years or 10 years down the road whenever you think that you may have an exit. But if you are going for an exit, it's an important point, because a 3 multiple detractor on your sale, that's the difference between a couple of comma points. So this is important what we're talking about. So with that, let's get into the first metric that I want to share with you here today. And this is effective hourly rate. And the simple way to calculate effective hourly rate is you take the profit from the last 12 months and then the number of hours you worked as the founder during that 12 months, and that is your effective hourly rate. So profit divided by hours equals effective hourly rate. Most of the time, founders don't know what their effective hourly rate is. They just know that they're tired and they know that they're working way more than they want. So it's more of a diagnostic because it's going to tell you where you really stand and what you can do in order to improve the time freedom that you have as a founder in this. And so when we look at like a low effective hourly rate, that really is something that we need to improve, and we need to improve it pretty quick because that doesn't give you any engine to leverage out any of your work. You really can't afford it. If your effective hourly rate is $100 and you need $100 to live your life, then you're not going to be able to hire anybody and get any help. So we're looking for a really high effective hourly rate. Typically, like a good sweet spot for this is if you're somewhere in the 400s to 600s, because that's going to give you leverage. We want the higher effective hourly rate that we can get. And I'm going to show you a few things of how you can improve your effective hourly rate. But right now, let's just talk about what exactly it is. So when you've got a high effective hourly rate, that's where you can start hiring some stuff out. That's where you can get help. That's where you don't have to do all of the things yourself. Now, there's an entire different conversation about actually allowing yourself not to control those things, but know that this is an important metric to have. So let's talk about how to improve your effective hourly rate. The first thing is something that most people, when you talk to them, will be super scared to do. But I promise, in my experience, it has worked every single time. And in the businesses that I've worked with and the founders that I've consulted, it works every single time, like 100% efficacy, though you wouldn't think that it would. On your next several deals, raise your prices by at least 20% without impacting delivery. Deliver the same thing, but increase your prices by 20%. You will not lose deals. You will make more profit. Your effective hourly rate will go up, and you'll be able to start hiring some stuff out and getting some of your time back. So when we do that, that's one thing you can do. The second thing that you can do that will help improve your effective hourly rate is just look at all the different services that you provide to your customers in whatever business that you're in and choose one of those things to cut that doesn't make a lot of margin. Now, you might wonder like, all right, well, what do I cut if that's really what you want to do? The most effective way I've found to do that is just ask my customers. So let's say that I've got 5 different services that my company is providing to somebody. I'll reach out to a sampling of my customers. It could just be 3 or 4 of the best ones that I have, or you may run a survey to like your broad customer base and talk to everybody. But you list out the 5 services that you're giving to these people and you say, listen, if we had to cut one of these services, which one do you think you could live without? Or which one of these do you use the least is another way to say that. That way, your customers can tell you which ones really don't matter to them. Because as we're building products and we're building services, we're doing that without all the data that we have from an existing group of customers. It's just our idea on what we think the marketplace might like. By asking your customers, what is it that you would take away if you had to take away one thing? Or what is it that you don't use very often? That can tell you what to cut. The idea with this is that if we cut that service, we also cut the labor associated with that service. And once we don't have the labor with that service, then we can increase our effective hourly rate because we can reprioritize that towards a higher leverage task. The next thing to think about when it comes to improving the effective hourly rate is just cut the tasks that you do that are low leverage, like $10 an hour VA tasks. We all do them as founders. It's simply the way it is. It's not something that we ever set out to do, but as we're growing, things happen rapidly, and without realizing it, we realize we're starting to do like $10 an hour tasks, things that we could easily pass off. The key is you've got to be able to see those things, not just kind of guess that they're there. If you want a way to figure out and assess and diagnose really how many $10 an hour tasks you're doing right now, you can get my free 48-hour founder time reset. I'll drop a link in the description of this video. And in 48 hours, you'll be able to use a plug and play tool to diagnose where your time is going, figure out what you should cut. And then there's a couple other cool things in there about delegation, which I'll talk about in a minute. But if you want to grab that for free, that's a tool. You can grab it in the link of the description. Let's look at the second metric, though, of what really needs to improve if you want to take 10 to 20 hours off of your calendar every single week. And what this is the leverage ratio. So the leverage ratio is pretty simple. You've got your team's hours versus your hours. So just for math purposes, to give you an example, let's say that you work 60 hours in a week and you had a VA working 10. Your ratio then is 7.17 to 1. And the goal over time is that you've got a 1-to-1 ratio in this. So you take your hours and your team's hours, and that's what we're really looking at here. And that's an important thing, because if we get to 1-to-1, then we're sitting in a good spot. And to illustrate this, let's say that you did 200 hours of doing. Would you trade that out for 20 hours managing somebody doing the work? Of course you would, right? Because you get more leverage for the outcome. Still the same 200 hours of doing, you're only spending 20 hours on it by managing the person that's doing. And then if you want to compress that even further, now imagine spending 4 hours managing the manager of the person who's doing. Now we've got 2 steps away from it and we've got much higher leverage. We're spending less time, but we're still getting the same amount of output. So this is an important thing to look at, just like the other ones. If we want to improve the leverage ratio, first we have to identify it. So figure out like, how many hours am I working versus how many is my team working? And then we're going to have that ratio. But to improve that ratio, it's pretty simple, right? The first step is to hire a VA. And you can hire VAs like on Upwork. They've got good ones there. And you'd be surprised at how little per hour these people are willing to work for, but still do high quality work. And so hire one that just does 5 to 10 hours a week worth of tasks. And what you're going to give them is you're going to give them at least one recurring task that's relatively easy for you to do. And I'll talk about delegating and how to do that in a second here as part of 3. But when you dish off this one task, one thing that you're doing, then you're going to wind up realizing that you really can get rid of tasks that you felt like you had to control otherwise. And so it's kind of like a toe in the water towards delegating and completely getting out of any day-to-day operations, is just taking one low leverage task and handing that off to a VA and having them work on that. And it's going to prove to you that you didn't really need to do it in the first place. And what this is going to do is it's going to open up your mind in thinking about, well, what else is it that I'm doing right now that I really could hand off to somebody else? But I've been holding on to it because of my story that says I'm really the only person that can do this. Which, by the way, this is a good thing to ask yourself every quarter, which is, what is the task that I'm doing right now that I could be managing this task instead of actually doing this task? And then you just make how to do that your goal for the next quarter. And that's a way that you can pull that off. So that's your leverage ratio. Again, this is your team's hours versus your hours. We really want to look at this as a 1-to-1 rather than a low ratio on their part and a high ratio on your part. Third thing that I want you to look at in terms of this metric is your delegation completion rate. How many people actually track this? Like, so very few. But the real time freedom and actually all the profit and everything good about a business comes in all the boring stuff. We want it to be in marketing. We want it to be in sales. We want it to be in like product design, but it really comes in the boring stuff. And delegation completion rate, that is a very boring thing. To figure this out, you take all of your weekly recurring tasks, and your delegation completion rate is the percentage of those tasks that have, one, an owner of the task clearly identified who is not you, and 2, you have some simple SOP or checklist for that task. If you've got those 2 things, that's your delegation completion ratio. So if you want to improve this, if you see that and you're like, okay, my delegation sucks, what do I need to do? There's a 4-step loop that's really easy to run through. The first is to do the task one more time by yourself, and do it methodically, do it slowly, and do it with a very high level of detail, because the second part of the loop is to document the process. I've found the best thing to do with this is just to record a Loom video if it's a task that I'm doing that's on a computer. Where I'm talking somebody through the task and visually showing them the task at the same exact time. And when you talk this through, talk it through like they're not visually watching it. because then we've got deeper level learning going on, because now we've got the auditory modality and the visual modality, and you just tend to explain things in a lot more depth and not skip things over when you discuss it or talk about it as if they weren't watching it. And that's going to save that task from coming back to you because they didn't understand it. Then the third step in this loop is to demonstrate the task. So you get somebody that you want to delegate the task to, an individual task owner, and then you demonstrate it live in front of them, the thing that you want them to do. And again, you over-explain this thing. Talk them through it as if they weren't there and we're only going to be able to listen to the audio of what you're doing. And that's going to give a sufficient level of detail, like 9 times out of 10 when you do it. But you've got to demonstrate it. And you've got to define what it means to be successful in that task while you're doing that. And then the final portion of that in this 4-step loop is just to delegate the task. Delegating the task, though, is not as simple as, here, take this task and go make them happy. It does not work that way. That's the way that we want it to work, because that's the way that we would do it as founders. We need to realize that everybody's skill level is different. Their ability to solve problems is different. Their ability to communicate is dramatically different than yours is as the founder. So we can't just say, go make them happy. We've got to define what success looks like for them. We've got to set up metrics for success of the task. And then we've got to come up with a check-in way, like a time that we're going to check in on the task. And then also, what's the reporting mechanism so we know that they're doing the task the way that we want them to do it? If we don't have any of those things, we can't really say that a task is delegated. Speaking of that, if you want to delegate a task, I mentioned the free tool that I built as part of the 48-hour founder time reset. The time dividend system dashboard is something where we do have a delegation function built into it. And it's just a tool that you plug in. It doesn't take any time to learn, and it just takes a few minutes to use. And it allows you to see where your tasks are in delegation from the time that they're in your inbox to the time that they are fully handed off. And when you track them, it helps you understand what it is you got off of your plate. But more importantly, it just makes you think through, like, what is it that's the success of this task? So if you want to grab that, I did build the tool as a free tool, and I'll put a link in the description here. And that's going to help you figure out where your hours are going, identify what the low leverage work is that you're currently doing that has you working 60 plus hours a week, and then shows you how you can delegate that and allows you to track the process from the time you think about it to full delegation of the task. So if you do want to grab the 48-hour founder time reset, click the link in the description of this video and you will be on your way. Most of the time, people get at least 3 hours back in their very first week once they download that tool. So grab it while it is still there. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.